Welcome to week 5, episode 5 of Hope, Power, and Healthcare with Melissa Reilly. And
Chris Hemphill.
we are so happy to be back with you. And this week, we're chatting about storms. So, for those of you that spend a lot of time with me, you'll know that I'm a total words of affirmation person, and I find quotes all the time. And I probably post them annoyingly on my Instagram and not really so much on my LinkedIn, but every once in a while I sneak one in. This week, I found something that really resonated with me, and I actually think creates a fun theme for our entire episode. It is a quote by Jameson Arasi, and he says, "We don't get to choose the storm, but we do get to choose what comes next. How we go on, how we heal, how we live." Maybe that's what the storm is all about. Not just surviving, but who we become in the aftermath. Chris, and I just love this quote because if you think about our founders, they're living in storms every day, potentially every hour, right? I mean, that's what innovation is all about. You pick this problematic area and you dive in and you're like, I'm going to fix it.
And my reaction, just fresh hearing that quote for the first time, is it's really honed in on who we become in the aftermath because we do get obsessed over the placement of a semicolon or this these mundane esoteric things, but we lose sight on what that's ultimately leading to, and that's a reminder to have some kind of north star during all the troubles that we come across.
Totally. Totally. And I didn't want to get super deep and tragic with storm tracking. And so I also found like a little bit of a moment of levity in the LinkedIn traffic this past week. Um, this is a friend of mine, Ruby Gadlerab. She runs this incredible company, M Disrupt. Fractional is that way of the future. And she writes this post on healthcare, trust, and evidence, right? And she goes, "Healthcare is built on trust, and trust is earned with evidence. Here's what real evidence looks like. Evidence is that your product works and does exactly what it says. Evidence is that it's better than the standard of care. Evidence that it improves real world clinical outcomes that actually matter. Evidence that it delivers ROI for whoever is footing the bill. Evidence that providers would use it without cursing you mid shift. Peer reviewed publications. Here's what's not evidence." And this is the part that had me like rolling on the floor: a pilot with 7 people from your CrossFit or solid core group. I added the solid core part. A random study that someone else did in 2009 on something kind of similar. Your marketing material that is clinically validated stamped all over it. A testimonial from a paid ad advisor that hasn't seen your product in action or even a real patient for a few decades. And a quote unquote great call with the FDA. Chris, what did you think about Ruby's post? I don't know that you saw that one either.
I didn't see it beforehand, and again, fresh reaction right now. I can't hide my facial expressions, but it just reminded me of years and years and years of rightfully excited commercial teams and stuff like that. It does feel good after that call with the FDA, or after you get somebody at the church or community centers who said, "Yeah, that's a great idea." That like that doesn't constitute evidence, but yeah, it just reminded me of that, and it reminded me of all the conversations we've been having about what are the standards that we should be talking about for ROI, because that's a major question. We're bringing up like, hey, here's what doesn't necessarily constitute it, but I think that a lot of good themes that we're going to touch in this episode tell people the types of things that they should be looking for. What about you?
Yeah, I'm really excited because I had a chance to listen to your interview with Dean Browell, and he is, quite funny himself, but also working on this really stealthy way to almost, I want to say, like storm track. Like he finds this feedback, and you can share a little bit more a little bit later around how to know if a storm is about to hit you, but you have to listen and you have to make sure that your evidence is aligned up to that feedback that you're hearing in the market, because both a lack of evidence and a lack of listening can drastically worsen your storm and or your aftermath of said storm?
Yeah, we have to get into the storm conversations when we're talking about Dean Browell, which Dean, he's the chief behavioral officer for a company called Feedback that is this, they're taking concepts from anthropology and ethnography and putting them into a digital realm within healthcare. So to convert that into English, what's happening is rather than completely relying on what he calls prompted feedback, like surveys, and we were talking a couple of episodes ago about like how systems can be gamed and timed with surveys and how you might not get the most honest feedback given the conditions of a survey. Well, his
like
model,
the like the employee survey, right?
yes,
Every
like
year that companies are doing, like how many of us actually answer truthfully or say, my boss knows I haven't taken that survey. They're probably going to see the verbatims, and can they actually tie that feedback back to Melissa Reilly?
exactly that. Yeah, it's like we know anybody taking those employee surveys, you know that the first question that they're going to ask when you put that negative response there is who did that. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
that safety zone. So what Dean's work does is it goes like it's looking for the unprompted information. What's happening and what's being discussed by region in various online properties in various online communities and things like that. And the reason why I went back to that storm analogy is because it's exciting work, but about some real heavy topics around healthcare worker burnout. So through that lens of healthcare worker burnout, where again, like we know that our physician fam, nurse fam, pharmacist fam, clinicians and people at the bedside, they're under incredible stress and pressure. And when these surveys come out, there's that cultural impetus to answer in a way that they think is going to be expected. I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but it goes deep to where like I just based on these wellness surveys and things like that come out and like if an organization knows that the outcome of that survey is going to be tied to them continuing to get accreditation, is that really going to be the most honest answers that you can expect? Mm-mm.
Yeah, I loved his vignette about pizza, and word clouds, because I'm a huge fan of like word clouds. You've got people on a Zoom and you're you know asking them to type in free form responses, and then the computer automatically makes the biggest words that people react to the biggest, right? And so in this case, the nurses was pizza, and if you just saw the pizza, you'd be like, man, those nurses, they just love pizza. Come on, fam. Nurses are our heroes. Let's feed those nurses more pizza. But what he actually uncovered through stealthy forums like Reddit and others, certain Facebook, very delineated Facebook groups, was that the nurses were actually saying, I don't want any more gosh darn pizza. That I really, not to steal his thunder, pizza became this metaphor for the fact that they needed more than just a pizza. And so I just love that. I feel like I'm going to yell pizza in my everyday life when I'm fed up with something. I'm like, this is the pizza, Chris.
Keep your all right. So it was awesome. Sherry, we're having an awesome time bringing this conversation to you from the floor of HMPS. Welcome to another Hope, Power, and Healthcare with Chris Hemphill from Modular Feedback and Dean Browell from
Feedback.
Feedback. Yes. So yeah, two companies with very similar names and similar ambitions. Actually, show a little bit of your ambition on your shirt here.
There you go. It's my slightly admonishing. That's not very data-driven of you.
We didn't want you to sit there and wonder what the shirt was saying the whole time. So there we go, mystery solved.
That's
but
right.
Please don't tune away now that you know the shirt says there's a lot to discuss and a lot to unpack here. Yes, two data-obsessed individuals, but with two very similar company names, but pursuing some different goals. And what we were really excited to get into was how this feedback mechanism works, but within a context of finding new ways to uncover something that we all know about the struggle with, the struggles that clinicians, that physicians, and that healthcare workers, both at the bedside and in the office side, have with their jobs. So we're looking at burnout from all perspectives, but in a very unique way. And
I wonder if you can shed some light on how the feedback approach and how it's different from how other ways that we've measured burnout and a whole lot of other things. If you just shed a background on the company.
Absolutely. So we specialize in digital ethnography, which I know immediately was like, what is that? Well, if you know about ethnography, the idea of observing behavior, I mean, that's a big part of it, right? It's taking that into a digital space, but we're doing it with actual anthropologists. So think of it as, what the unprompted behavior is. That's what we want to know, as opposed to prompted, right? Prompted would be focus groups, surveys, even in direct interviews. Great reasons to do that, great things you can get from that. But we want to know,
unprompted versus prompted, what's the difference?
Yeah, so the idea of I'm going to ask you a question and your answer may be different just because I'm asking it, as opposed to unprompted where, this is what people who actually want to know, let's say it's about a disease, right? They're actually asking people about it. They're actually talking to one another. And I mean that it could be in a review, right? Which is not really a discussion, that's kind of a one-way, or it could be in actual discussions, forums, message boards, and whatnot. And so, yeah, we look at anything publicly available. So discovery is a big thing for us, finding out what channels matter to an audience. So if it's for a hospital, or if it's for a, let's say if it is physician-based, for example, and then people want to know how are these physicians talking about these innovations. We're looking at we'll fish anywhere the fish are. Physicians are a great example because they might talk one way on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and then talk a totally different way on Student Doc, which is a great forum that has not been full of students in a long time. It's a lot of working physicians there. And so, we've been at this for about 16 years, do a lot of work in healthcare, also in the federal space, military, family, quality of life as a part of that, and then a lot of work in higher ed too.
Well, let's go a little bit deeper, because for the people out there wondering, including me, about how we can reliably capture this unprompted data and learn from it. And I before we even get into that, the difference between survey data and what you're collecting out in the wild, out in the real world, the way that hits me is there's no guarantee. If you ask me a question on this survey, you're going to get not the answer that reflects my opinion, but often what I want you to think my opinion is, so I can get on about my day, right?
That's even assuming you answered the survey. That's the other problem, right? Is just getting the respondents, And the way I like to talk about it is the NPS score, right? Net Promoter Score. Would you recommend this brand? Well, I don't want to know just would you. I want to know, do you? And you should want to know if there's a difference between what you're telling me and what's actually happening out in the wild. And that's we get at the do you. We want to know, what is that unprompted, open discussion, and if A, that's great behavior that you're ignoring if you don't take a look at, but then B, that's also the environment you are going to have to deal with. It's the environment that new patient or that person with the new question is going to see that environment. So knowing what that landscape looks like is going to help you, whether it's messaging or just understanding what that consumer journey or employee journey, right? And that's where the tie into burnout and the tie into mental health with those who work in healthcare. It's a great example. Yeah. For example, people choose channels for different reasons. As I often point out, someone who talks about their recent breast cancer diagnosis on Facebook in front of friends and family, that's one conversation that we want to know about, but it's also how they talk on breastcancer.org. Well, that's the same thing with burnout, right? Or even, honestly, let's even go even broader for a moment and just talk about mental health. There's the want to talk with people who at least have some sort of peer relationship, right? Maybe it's somebody who's in the same kind of job, right? But then they also might be on a channel where they can deliberately be anonymous, and that might be a profile name they've used before, but for the most part, they're sometimes really crying for help or asking for help in an environment with, again, people that might understand, might be able to help them, but they're often choosing that channel because of anonymity or because of its robustness in the community. And so, especially when we're talking about, let's say, the healthcare workers, look, nurses were some of the first people to dive into social media. They had .edu email addresses, so they were the first people in Facebook groups. They've been there since the beginning of all of this. So, it's no surprise that on a American Nurses Association message board or a Reddit thread, there's discrete threads for types of nurses in Milwaukee, right? So there's really narrow peer groups, and that's where they can often be the most honest. Yes, it might be about that annoying doc on floor 2 and, like whatever. But it also could be, it very often is about, what they're going through, what they just saw, what has been building up over a long period of time.
So by relying on a system that's been more focused on these surveys and that type of collection, what have we been missing out on?
Oh man, I mean, let's just take the employee satisfaction, right? Like those surveys, they go out, usually it's once a year. It's a good, decent pulse check. It might tell you some of what's happening, but tell you nothing about why, right? And what's actually behind it. That's even assuming that they're answering honestly and that you're getting a good cross section, like you said, about just even from a respondent's perspective. But what it's not telling you is that day to day. And also, we are talking about a population. We see this all the time, especially with families and pediatrics too, but healthcare workers too. They're over-surveyed. So the idea that like, oh, there's another survey asking me about my mental health, and like, you think I'm going to be honest there, versus in the message board or in the thread that's just for other people in the exact same job I'm in across the country, where we can talk openly about what we've seen and heard and feel, that's a total different level of honesty, right? And it's up to us to ignore that, and a lot of time we are ignoring that, but it's there, and they are publicly talking about their issues. And there's more you can get into too that's even more nuanced in the way they're talking, and that's why I think it's so important to have a social scientist and anthropologist that can really look for that. I'll give you an example. During COVID, we did a lot looking at whole states and tracking specifically at the time, it was nurse and physician burnout, but even just talking about nurse burnout. And if you did a word cloud, with like a typical software scraping thing, the word pizza would be the biggest word. And you'd be like, oh wow, they must love pizza. Let's feed them more pizza. No, they were using pizza as you do not understand us if you think we only want free pizza right now. We just worked a double shift. Like the pizza's cold by the time I even get it, if there's even any there. And like this traveler next to me is making 10 times what I'm making, and I'm the one that's been here for 8 years.
So you did that word cloud, and we can share that on the screen.
Context, yeah, it's the context of that is so important. And so the other thing then that we noticed that would not have come up in a word cloud is that nurses tend to have 2 personality behaviors online. There's the everyone knows I'm a nurse, right? That's like the Facebook, Instagram, right? It's your neighbor knows that you're a nurse. They're like, does this look infected? Like you're thanking you for what you do. And then there's the how they talk just to nurses, right? And one of the things we saw was that they started saying the quieter parts that they would just say to nurses out loud. That's a behavior flag. And so we started using that as a model to say, whenever we saw that in a region, that was a flag for a certain level of burnout. And you got to stop it with just like at the time, with like the first 18 months of COVID, your healthcare heroes messaging is going to fall on deaf ears, right? If you hit that level. And so it was a way, just a little behavioral
Wait, how
tweak.
fast did you detect that? Because I know that language
We
continued for a
started
long
seeing
time.
it in August of 2020.
Wow.
Like that's when we started to see that, and it wasn't everywhere. It was just we could do it by the county. Like these nurses in this county being served at this system in this facility, we saw a trick here, but not over here. I mean, just think about being able to get that granular with how you're responding to a situation, but it's also that's the nuance of behavior, right? And part of it was us just recognizing that was even happening, but then when we started putting that into play, it was a model.
That's incredible, and it makes me wonder about how this plugs in. So we have these environments where people are used to the output from surveys and the Likert scales and everything like that. How do you plug that? How did you get your partner organizations to respond to this new way of looking at things?
Yeah, the good news is, I think we only do what we do. So we're not trying to do other kinds of research techniques. So first off, like not being threatening is always important. But also I think it's the want for the full picture, right? That unprompted and prompted. Again, like, not to keep using the NPS score, but like you should want to know if your preference study says that everybody loves you, but nobody will say it out loud. Like you should want to know that. So I think what we've done is we've partnered with other kinds of research. Sometimes that's or we're still pretty independent in terms of our outputs, and sometimes we're able to merge them.
Well,
and be able to say, hey, look at this, but then look at these visualizations of how they're talking, and it gives you a much more nuanced picture.
And what are some, so we're talking about how to explain it and get it into the people's heads and minds and everything like that. Have you seen some changes? Have you seen some policies shift based on?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and we've seen things where we gave a giant warning and they didn't listen, and it came back to bite them later. We've seen all of those things. But yeah, absolutely, because people can make much smarter decisions. If it's, let's say it's a marketing function, right? It may be about what message you put out, that you now understand that environment better to message better, whether it's even the words, right, that people are using. But then also even operationally, right? Like, stop it with the pizza. It may be more about taking the situation a little more serious or in a different, more nuanced way. To use the pharmacy example, we did a study where we looked at, what keeps pharmacy managers up at night. And it was a year and a month, so it's 13 months ahead of the giant strikes at Walgreens. And it's predictive. It like feels cool to say we predicted it. We didn't predict, we just saw the behavior. They were ready, they were burning out, they were talking about, they were actually, talk about the pizza, they looked over the fence at nurses and they said, you know what our version of pizza is? I mean, this is like a direct quote. They're like, you know what our version of pizza is?
Can I guess?
Yeah, go for it.
Yoga.
Nope.
No,
but if you think about it, what's the one thing that supposedly they get every day that has made it seem as if this is so you can take a break?
Coffee?
It's the closed for lunch.
Closed for lunch.
Like you'll see the 1 hour lunch break. That you see these, sometimes they're like taped up, right? Like the signs and things. That 1 hour for lunch break or half an hour for lunch break, it's a joke. And they talk about it as being a total joke because they're not off. All they did was close the window. They're still working just as hard in the background.
Incredible.
And so they've literally, they made the connection themselves. They said, this is our version of pizza.
That's painful.
It is, but it's a great example of how they're, even in these quote unquote B2B situations, right? Like these people, those in healthcare, they know what each other are going through. And they're looking and they're saying, look, nurses, maybe it's a strike, whatever it is, right? They're like, look, they started a movement to protect themselves, like out of COVID. And they're looking over the fence saying, maybe we should do that. And they were talking about this a year before the walkouts at Walgreens. A month later, the CEO of Walgreens was fired. That entire walkout was planned out on Reddit. Like we saw it, like a year ahead of time. So it's a great example of like how at least operationally, by listening, first off, it's not waiting for the one employee satisfaction survey you do in 1 year. You get those results 3 or 4 months later, you parade them out at a town hall, right, to talk about how some number moved up or down. And then maybe you enacted some change that's going to take place next fiscal year. This is about getting way more nuanced and understanding when you've really got an issue and have some depth to what the why is behind that so that you can make operational change on a weekly basis if you wanted to, but at a minimum a monthly.
And this sounds so broadly applicable too, because a lot of the way that we do evaluations for all kinds of conditions or a kind of understanding, like it doesn't lead to the nuance that it's capable through.
Right, well, and it can hit at different stakeholders too. And I think maybe that's another good point. We did a big study for for British Columbia and the Ministry of Health. And it was right before they spun off the Ministry of Mental Health. Like they were in the middle of spinning that off, and we did some foundational research for them around mental health broadly, but it's specifically addiction. And what we ended up looking for wasn't just the person who self-identifies as struggling with this, it was the neighbor, right? It was the coworker who is asking, generally again, trying to keep some anonymity. So they're on an anonymous forum or a Reddit thread or whatever. And they're saying, I know this person has a problem. Like I care about them, I have no idea what to do. Like what are the resources? And one thing we were looking at was how were people talking about the actual resources and how many people were asking for that but didn't know, like the dot wasn't connected for them. That's the other thing too, you can get at these other stakeholders, right? So you're talking about like burnout in healthcare, it's also the spouse that notices it.
Wow.
that talks about the impact of them as maybe a parent with their kids or even just their own relationship. So it's about that person isn't going to get surveyed. That person doesn't take the employee survey. And yet they're the ones that might be the key to detecting burnout and things like that. So I think it's about opening the aperture, right, of the issue that you're studying and being really open to the channels that might be there, the stakeholders that might be talking about it, and then capturing that behavior, and that will help you'll make a better survey the next time you go out, right? You'll ask better questions. We work with great example.
I didn't want to make it sound like we're beating up on surveys.
No, but
like
it is.
Yeah.
It's about how it works together. And actually, we do a lot of work with Cast and Hugh. Love them to death. In-depth interviews. We are working together to create, products and services to say, hey, let's have feedback, detect, and then hey, when something comes up as a red flag, then go sick Cast and Hugh and their deep interview process on that, right? What a great way to have something surface and then go get it, go at it. Again, you would never get that at an employee satisfaction. But this way you can detect something and then go do a deeper dive based on that one-on-one.
Yes.
And that's, again, it's about making this stuff work together as opposed to getting sort of that rote, in the habits that we get into that aren't revealing as much as we'd like them to reveal.
Well, I wonder, this research is out or continuously being done. How does this integrate into the bigger picture in which there's a whole lot of innovators and people that are focused on finding ways to address burnout in various ways? What role does feedback play in that just overall?
So I think that it's a role that we relish because I think that there's a huge advocacy tie in there. I mean, I think that there's an opportunity for us to take what we've learned because we've studied communities, right? I mean, we've studied community for 16 years. So whether it's what are communities lacking, what questions don't get answers, right? Somebody sort of almost asks in the dark and nobody responds, right? We've actually done a pilot one time with a state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, on could you use this technique for needs assessment? If you literally looked at how many people are talking about one particular issue in a particular county, that could be a reason to fund that resources in that county more, or whatever the case may be. So I think there's some great big picture things that I think, even some of the work we've done with foundations and things like that, and how it can roll up to population health and much bigger picture issues even in a region that allows an organization to get their heads around it in a way that is, I love to talk about it as an innovation, but I think even more than that, it's just a depth and a nuance than we typically see. It's because it's unprompted, it's not about us having to have the sharpest scalpel to know what question to ask. It's allowing them to tell us in their own words, as they're talking to each other, what's important, what's going on, what are their challenges.
And to the innovators out here watching, because that's a big focus of the podcast, is just getting messages and thoughts out and helping people shape the innovations that they're trying to do, whether they be in startups or larger entities and things like that. What are some design decisions that people can start making to really get into the nuance and when they're addressing burnout and other serious issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple ways. Number one would be thinking about how this could validate or invalidate certain assumptions that you're making coming into, whether it's you're innovating on a product or a service, right? Understanding that market of what may be a very exciting feature for you, but you realize that's not what people are asking for. They're asking for it a different way. But we also do quite a bit, and I think from that innovation standpoint too, is making better segmentation and personas, right? To think about how they might approach that product differently. But then also on a more truly just technical level, here's a great way to get a massive data set that you could merge and it could feed into other things. It could feed into AI, right? If you could take, here's how everyone actually talks about this issue and feed that into AI so that your agent or whatever you've created can really talk with you in a much more plain way that is the way your stakeholders talk. That'll keep you won't just be arm's length from the problems, right? It could be a very interesting way to train other innovations to be more accurate and have more depth to them and not so surface.
And just to get into what you're saying with AI, are you saying take this take this massive information and then do what with it? Like, are we talking about fine tuning or training models? Or
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Let it feed it. So we're a qualitative research technique, and I'll defend that to the day I die. I love qualitative research, but we get quant because we code all of this behavior, and we've got that into a table, right? We use, whether it's Airtable, whatever the kind of visualization system that we want to use, or we can use that and merge it with other data. But absolutely, it could be used to train, right? Used to feed in on a constant basis. That way, and make a cooler, better way to interface, and again, get you more nuance, get you more context. That's typically what we're missing.
Well, in defense of qualitative data, we actually did a panel at the Behavioral Health Tech Conference that was specifically about, it was a celebration of how you can use qualitative data to get deeper nuance. And one of the bigger aspects of it too was like if you're working with natural language and you're working with, and of course that's my preferred domain and everything like that, there's just a whole lot more nuance that you can get versus that 1 to 7 survey type collection.
Absolutely.
That I'm not beating up.
All research techniques have their place. It's just being aware of what tools you're using at once.
Yes.
And if you're using only prompted, just know what you're missing.
So let's talk too about an important issue is just the type of media, music, movies, whatever keeps you moving. We might have been having a conversation about the Butlerian Jihad for the Dune fans out there. What is some pop culture or media, share what you've been hitting on for the past month or so.
Oh my God. Well, first off, Andor is back, and I think Andor is some of the best TV.
Is that a Star Wars?
The Star Wars
thing. Oh my
thing
goodness.
It is. It is incredible. There's a scene, there's one of the episodes that's set in a prison in the first season. It's one of the best episodes of TV I've seen in like a decade. Okay. So that's what's setting me on fire right now.
I had not been watching the Star Wars series, but
that's the one to watch if you're going to watch any of them. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, good to know, and thank you for sharing. Honestly, some in-depth dimensions that I hadn't seen. I had not heretofore known about this way of looking at burnout, and I really appreciate the motivation behind your work, working with states and governments and things like that to try to get some broad level support around these issues.
That's right, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. It's great to talk to you.
All right, thank you very much, Dean. And where can people follow you?
So Discover Feedback is our URL, but honestly, find me on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm pretty chatty there. Dean Browell. There's no one else with the same name, so.
Do you publish cool research and visualizations and things like that?
Yeah, we do. We try to do some white papers. We actually did one on nurse burnout during COVID and how it maps to what we saw with pharmacists. So there's an interesting white paper there actually that we can that you can get on discoverfeedback.com. But I post about that kind of stuff all the time.
Well, much appreciated.
We got to write together. We should write something together.
100%. Okay. Y'all,
done.
Again,
watching it live. See, this is.
After watching that and after hearing that, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if you've used or seen the output of an EMR lately, Chris, but I mean, I absolutely empathize with our healthcare workers, our healthcare heroes. You can see all the reasons why they're going to have, burnout. In some ways, I got distracted from the storm, which was the burnout, because I got so excited by what Dean is able to do just with his listening methodologies. Because if I'm such a solver and I wanted to go to, well, what are all the things that we could ultimately do to help reduce that clinician burnout? But I definitely got ADHD distracted because I was like, man, I want to get on some of these forums and I want to understand what people are actually saying about burnout.
Yeah, and let's lean into that distraction too, because we were using that as a very important way to say, hey, when we're starting to look at evidence in this way, when we're starting to look at this unprompted conversation, there's a whole range of different kinds of exploration that we can do that we simply can't ask for on a survey. And one example of that, it's like I'm always going to tie things to my time at my most recent employer, Wobot, is there like when people have conversations with about their mental health experiences with chatbots and things like that, there's a like there's a lot of free text data that is that's being exchanged, and what happens a lot of the time is that because of just the difficulty of addressing text message issues and things like that, of working with text data. Even if you have an LLM, working with millions and millions and millions of conversations is untenable. So when we developed ways of understanding what's bringing people to the table, and when things like eating disorders and financial issues and issues with drinking and things like that, or just overall anhedonia, feelings of sadness and things like that, when those started to surface, we started realizing that these are a lot of things that we can't necessarily survey for. We don't know. There's so many hundreds of thousands of different possibilities that we need to allow ourselves to just react to what's going on out there. And there was a strong parallel to what we discovered in that work.
Yeah, I can so see that. And I think what was so interesting, in one of the vignettes, he was talking about how nurses were one of the first to kind of get out on the message boards, and they had the .edu domains. And so they've had time to not only like aggregate, but almost specialize onto boards. So he was saying that they have some very specific threads that are going about, a group, a cohort of nurses in a certain specific geography. Um, and I also found it super interesting that like the people could have two personas. So they had more of their public social media persona, mm-hmm. and then they had a little bit more of their private in their cohort, in their community. For me, that's like, okay, so interesting. Like, so really to understand if your product is working in the right way, you have to really get into your true ICP, and you have to make sure that you're getting the unfiltered, unvarnished version of your ICP. And it really resonated with something I actually heard, yesterday out in the wild with a founder and payer. And, the founder was telling the payer how free the children felt using their technology just to be themselves. And that got me wondering, okay, so the very, I'm going to be slightly stereotypical for a moment, right? The very educated nurse population who probably had been on the internet since the internet happened, right? Finally were able to feel comfortable to be themselves in their very specific thread. But children on a digital tool, just meeting said tool, could feel very, very comfortable. And I started to wonder, are there some nuances in age and demographics and medium that might influence? And then I thought, wow, it's very hard to find this stealthy feedback.
So that was making me think a bit too about when you were listening to this, what were some ideas, like given the ability to penetrate into where real discussions are happening, what are the types of things that healthcare innovators should be looking for?
Yeah, I think the easiest takeaway for me was probably twofold. One is I thought of prompted and unprompted as a little bit like structured and unstructured, mm-hmm. right? There's so much value in an unstructured situation. And so how can you always be mining unstructured? And then I thought a little bit about, something we'll talk about a little bit later is like, Chris, you've been teaching me a little bit of notebook LLM, right? So I feel like I'm proficient, right? It's like Emily in Paris, Melissa in technology some days, right? I've gotten incredibly proficient with ChatGPT. My husband's like, if you mention ChatGPT one more time, Melissa, he's like, I'm not going to speak to you for the rest of the day. But notebook LLM is a little bit harder for me, right? Not that the tool is much harder, but like, I'm newer to it. I haven't added as many pictures to it and tried to make it design my house, and so in some ways I'm a little bit unstructured around the notebook LLM situation. Mm-hmm. And let me just tie all this wonderfulness together. It's like, how can our innovators go find the places where their ICP is talking about their product or their problem? And how can they start to feed that information into tools or use companies like feedback to be able to make and take action on this unstructured, unprompted data, because it's really where those nuggets are.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I want to get into Notebook LM in the moment, but I want to talk about those nuggets and things like that, because as innovators, anybody working on a project, you know that there's going to be a there's going to be a question about ROI, and there's going to be a question about clinical outcomes as they're commonly measured. We're heavily in the mental health space, so we bring up the PHQ-9 and GAD-7 a lot. So we know that there's going to be an expectation to collect those numbers, but does that really tell you the full story of what you want to know about your ICP? Big fat no on that one. And it's the big takeaway that I would have from listening to somebody like Dean, or just even hearing our chats, is there's that baseline that you have to get to, the numbers and metrics and all that. But now you're seeing that if you really want to know, is this the type of thing that's pertinent to my ICP? What's the response? Getting into that deeper perspective and knowing where they live and find information and have those unprompted discussions is the way to go.
Yeah, it really kind of actually pulls me back to Ruby's quote around the CrossFit group, right?
Mm-hmm.
So while, 7 people in your CrossFit group does not an evidence-based make, if the 7 people taking the CrossFit group are members of your ICP and they're yelling that your product is like their pizza, it might actually be a sign that you need to listen to that feedback and then, marry that feedback with your clinical evidence base to make sure that your product actually survives the storm. How did I do tying all of our metaphors together?
Well, you are a pontific person. You probably weren't even trying, because it's literally the word feedback, and you enroll the name of that company into yes. So I'm gonna give it an A+ out of 10.
A+ out of 10.
Yeah.
Yes, I can live with that.
I'm getting my measurement standards mixed up. My bad.
Yeah. I'm sure there's someone in a Reddit page right now, talking about us.
Oh yeah, yeah. We've been getting a lot of positive comments. I'm waiting. We haven't made it until we get our first hate mail. So I'll be looking to get flamed on Reddit really soon.
Yes, I can't wait for you to read that one. Have you seen those? Those are amazing, where people read the criticisms about themselves on Instagram. It's awesome.
Oh, okay. That's a priority. Send us some hate mail so we can read it on camera and just have fun with it. Thank you, y'all. Thank you, fam. Yeah. But we'll know where your heart truly is.
Yes.
So, going further into this evidence conversation, there's a study that came out that I'm really excited about. From the I think it's called Peterson Healthcare Technology Institute, PHTI, about virtual solutions for depression and anxiety. And one thing that we're really excited about is, last week on episode 4, we were talking about Health Bench, which was OpenAI's LLM evaluation standard for evaluating healthcare conversations. While I thought that their methods were cool and that it was amazing that they open sourced it, there's still a big barrier there, which I no discredit to all the people working on the project, but it still is a large company that's patting themselves on the back. When it comes to one thing that we want to encourage when it comes to, well, what constitutes real evidence, like we heard the quote from Ruby ahead. Well, let's get deeper into some things that constitute real evidence and why I'm excited. I saw Dr. David Cooper from the APA, Dr. Trina Histon. They were excited about it too, about why this paper is exciting. I'm going to talk about funding a little bit. Funding is actually when you're evaluating evidence, one thing that you want to look for is, well, are they being paid to say that? Are they is somebody going to benefit from this? They in this report, they evaluated several behavioral health care technology vendors, but none of them have paid sponsorships. Believe me, I did a lot of detail and looking, and there's no vendor money that's exchanging hands for these evaluations. So we have this report that they're talking about ROI and they're talking about efficacy and a lot of other things, but we can trust a little bit more because we know that there's not a conflict of interest in the funding. So
Yeah.
$50 million.
I always
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I always think about that as like just simplifying it out for the fam, right? Like third party validation, right? Did you pay someone to say nice things about you? Or or do they do it, because they have created an evidence base or standards by which they're comparing you and others to?
100%. And yeah, just keep that question in mind with all of these things. And if you're frustrated with a conversation that might have happened with a chief financial officer or somebody with that revenue and data tie, know that they're asking the same questions about you. If you're reporting on your own ROI and it's not like a third party or peer reviewed independent study, know that they think that it is biased. But with all of that, like those are some standards. We're just trying to give away some nuggets that you can use. But anything that stood out, like we're talking about the overall report, what stood out to you about it?
Yeah, I saw this ahead of us finding it collectively together, and it was so interesting because another founder that I work with who's mentioned in there had actually forwarded it over to me because they were so excited by it. And so as I started to dig a little bit deeper, I try not to get as wrapped up in the like company versus company, argument. But holistically, there were some companies that were standing out as winners in that, winners of people that like you should believe them because they actually have outcomes attached to their clinical protocols. I think to me, I lifted up to a little bit more of the macro level, to basically say, okay, this starts to get really, really interesting. And when you look at the validity of digital tooling, it's valid. Some of these digital tools that allow individuals to self-serve, Chris, are working. Not all, but some, right? And so what does that actually mean when we start to orchestrate a care delivery ecosystem?
What's the nature of some of these tools? Like when it stands out, and we know we're not trying to go company versus company. I feel like that was kind of in the report too. They were talking about the types of evidence and robustness that made these companies stand out. Were there some themes that you saw with regards to what type of evidence people like that level of robustness?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take it a slightly different direction and I'm going to wrap back. I'm going to take it from like using using some of the tool sets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So since I've been in the mental health space, people have been coming forward with apps with like digital things you can do around and adjacent to the therapy session. But you also have to think about like, A, will the human do them? B, does the activity kind of make sense? Does it feel annoying? Am I going to be screaming pizza in the middle of trying these digital tool sets, right? And the only way to get the outcome is that the human has to want to engage, right? So I can speak to my own personal experience using Meru, which I found to be incredibly awesome. People might laugh at me, but I would, I was trying it out as I was vetting the company several times, and I would be able to do it walking the dog. Right. And so, like, what therapy session can you actually do? I mean, maybe you talk to your therapist, Chris, while you're walking the dog, but I've never been able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would leave, the dog would be walked. I would have completed, the therapy exercise. I was like, this is awesome. This tool works for, busy moms that have an overloaded schedule.
So the part that hits for me is they are tackling a question around engagement as well. So we talked a little bit earlier about efficacy and clinical standards. We didn't get into detail about randomized control trials and how to look at them and everything like that. Maybe we save that for another episode. But there's a big story around engagement because that's kind of like where the rubber meets the road. We can have all these, cool.
You cannot have an outcome if you don't have engagement. Literally, everyone's like, these are great outcomes. Okay, what's your engagement level?
Exactly. And it was really heartening to see. I think they're calling for kind of unified way to look at it. I have mixed feelings on that because uh, different applications might have different purposes of engagement. There are some, I've been talking to a founder recently where their goal is to have someone not need the application anymore and not have to be in it every day, whereas others, they have protocols where it is dependent on usage. So it's a very nuanced conversation, but more and more, it's really one of the harder parts is like, if you build it, will they come? And I was super pleased to see it addressed. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've read that. I can see how you read through that in that way, and I think that's excellent. Where I went as I was kind of reading through that was a little bit more around maybe more from that payer persona, coming back to that, as I can't shed that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay, this actually creates, for the ones that are working in proving outcomes, a strong evidence base that the digital tool sets should be included inside or as part of a therapeutic regimen. And this is unbiased, unpaid research that says this thing works, and therefore there's an opportunity to move members there and be very confident that they will engage and they will have good outcomes.
That's a strong point too, because how is this thing going to be used? How is it going to materialize in the general plan? And let's see, that's an intimidating conversation for a lot of founders and people building out innovations. I have some thoughts, but I wonder your thoughts on, hey, I'm a new company with a new way of doing things. How do I get an organization to listen and adapt to the changes that I'm trying to bring into their care structure?
Yeah, such a great question, Chris. I mean, I always go to like, are they in the mindset to hear your problem, right? And so the problem that you care about, your pizza, or your storm, and your idea to get through that storm may not be the payer's idea to get through that storm.
Mm-hmm.
And so the companies that are most successful have aligned up their solution to that payer's problem.
So it's understanding that payer's problem, getting in deep enough and being humble enough to listen, and then working with them on how that may fit in if there's enough evidence that it can actually solve the problem.
Yeah, the evidence is what you bring with you when you are telling them why your solution solves the problem.
There's a mutual friend of ours, Dama Dipiana, and like she runs a company in the youth and adolescent space called Manatee. And I had a conversation with her a while back. We might actually post that. But I thought that she was a really good example of someone who's coming in, an innovator. And this was a conversation they were having with I think a payer back to innovation hub called NovaWell, where there was a certain way of doing things and a certain way of looking at the child perspective versus the family perspective, and there was a little bit of a give and take and a little bit of change that they had to make to the overall plan. But I think there was like it was just a good story on a good unison, like a good strategic and mutual understanding between both of their teams to then deploy something and make it work.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Suzanne Kunis and what Rachel Goldberg are doing over at NovaWell. I think they're so innovative, and I love that example of what you said from Dama and Manatee. And I think definitely we should share a little bit more so they can hear kind of from their words. But I think that's a great example of an innovator finding a payer with a problem where they can create a partnership and have great outcomes. The storm that the payer is experiencing can be solved by the innovator, and so I love when those matches happen.
Well, you said something that you didn't know it, but you said something that might sound really intimidating to people is I'm an innovator and I'm finding a payer or et cetera, provider, whatever in my market with a problem. But we all know that we're in a really confusing, really contentious times when it comes to funding and sales cycles and decision times and things like that. And you shared an article that I think kind of provides something to help people through this storm. And I'd love to get into talking about this potential silver lining, even though the economy is not in our favor right now.
You're talking about the Airbnb article,
Yes.
Chris? Okay. Yeah, I found that and I was like, it's actually an old article that they recycled. And I was like, oh, so it sounds like there were two storms. But part of the reason that that article totally resonated with me was because it's really tough to start a business. You and I both know that now, first person. And even though it has been an amazing and wonderful and happy year for me personally, I was telling somebody the other day, this has been my best year yet.
Woo!
Yeah, it's still really freaking hard.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And what tips specifically for you? Because I resonated with it. I was like, yeah, even the Airbnb people say it's really hard, but you should still do it. Like that was my big takeaway.
My big takeaway is, so y'all know I got laid off on April 7, like company shrinking down to what it needed to be, and very friendly terms and everything like that. But overall, it was a question of, do I open up the job boards and go and seek out another employee relationship, or do I uh, go ahead and start something on my own? And I leaned over towards start something because I figured, like, yeah, okay, wow, hellish environment. Tariffs are making everything shaky and scary, and people don't know if they want to invest and all that. But I thought to myself, even if the headwinds were great, like even if the overall macro picture was fabulous, starting a business isn't easy. Going through these pathways is not going to be regardless. So might as well get started now. So that was kind of the thinking, was just it's going to be a challenge either way. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And since then, it's been an emotional roller coaster, right? Like this is my first time going into business for myself, and a lot of this is consulting work. And at the beginning, trying to just get things together, make sure the finances stay up, make sure that I can keep the lights on. I'm playing, for the people that can see, make sure I can keep the lights on. There's just a lot of risk and fear about, are people going to be interested in this concept, or are people going to jump on board? And I would say that I'm on definitely a high point right now, but it was an emotional roller coaster that I didn't know I was jumping into.
Yeah, that the storm, if you will, right?
Yes.
It was just a storm, and you're like, I resonate with that, right? When you are full-time employed by a company, you have created this contract where if you show up for work and you do a job, right, the paycheck comes.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about fractional work, or even consulting work, that contract is a lot lighter than what you would see from an employer. And you have to also be able to do your own business development in a way that you may not have to. Well, you definitely don't have to. You only have to business develop one time, usually maybe 3 or 4 interviews to get the job, and then it's yours. But I do feel like as a consultant, probably 10% for some people more of your time is actually spent in that business development mode.
And so there's some trade-offs. I love this world. Honestly, this is the path for me. But you did acknowledge some important trade-offs. Is that maybe you're not ready for the business development component and balancing those things, and maybe it takes. There's a friend of mine who wants to get started with something, but wants to get some more infrastructure experience or et cetera experience first, and then be able to align. So, like that. All I wanted to, what I would like to impart from this is, no matter what the storms are, like I compare it to when I go out for a run. A lot of times I don't want to go out for a run when it's raining, but then when I get in, it's like, okay, we're in here and we're doing it, we're flowing, we're having to jump over more puddles and everything like that, but we're just figuring out how to make it work. And then when my feet are dry, when the weather's good, I'm that much faster.
Yeah, there's this super cute meme. I'll have to find it and try to post it. It's this like adorable little girl who's like exercising and she's running and she's like, why are you running? And she's like, obviously like almost crying. And she's like, it just feels so good, right? Like, and trying to get to that point of that, when is it going to feel good? I'll find it. But it does. Like I think it does feel good. Like the hustle, it's worth it. And I think we continue to encourage people who want to strike out on their own to do it. I try to be realistic with people that are going to do it. Here are your hard parts. You're ensuring that you have enough pipeline, ensuring that you are a good fit for the opportunities you take. Sometimes you don't know that until you've taken a few opportunities that aren't a fit. There are also some systems. I don't think I have the immediate links to them, but we can continue to look for them or maybe bring guests on. Some people have told me that there are companies or systems that you can do or classes you can take for like $5,000 or $6,000 that either help you build your own personal brand or learn how to do some of your billing. I don't feel like I know I didn't use those personally. I don't know the names of any of those, but happy to hear from fam members that have found some of those and what their experience has been.
Well, quick question. You have that growth and sales strategy experience from many different worlds. Could you talk about pipeline and like what it means to build that pipeline and get that baseline security? I ask that because a lot of people they'll have good experience on the development and scientific side, but not understand the commercial side.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's just two key tips there. Tip number one is like your scope of services, right? And I think this helps on two levels. Like, what are you set out in the world to do? What is your vision and your purpose? I took a lot of time, to look at that and say, at least at a high level, these are the things that I would be offering, right?
Sorry.
Oh, that was like perfect timing of the music, though. Yes, that is how it is, right? Like you should be hearing the angels singing when you're like, this is my purpose, right? If you do not feel that purpose or that calling or like feel that you have like enough energy, let's just say energy in that space, then just don't do it. Like go do something else, do something, do something where you're going to be guaranteed that paycheck in that space that you feel good at. But if you don't have kind of that hustle or that drive to hang out your shingle, probably don't do it because it's going to be really, really hard for you. I think tip number 2 is more financial and pipeline oriented. Like you have to also know what you need to make. That helps you assign a price. And the market will also assign a price to your services.
So one thing that I was going through some stress a little bit earlier because there's so many great conversations I was having, but I didn't know when things would start materializing and what that would look like, and whether the lights would stay on based on how these things shaped out. So there's all kinds of CRMs out there, but I thought I did a evaluation. I've used like HubSpot and Salesforce and everything like that, but I wanted something that was lightweight and open source. And I chose this system called Odoo, ODOO. And I was able to actually construct like there's a sales pipeline feature where you can put in the opportunities, conversations, deal conversations that you're having, put in what the expected price or economic value is and the probability of closing. And in my mind, that was it just visualized rather than having these things floating in my little notebook here that you can see on screen and all that. It brought everything together and kind of established like, hey, here's what your revenue stream might look like. And it was a blanket of security, just seeing the numbers on screen and knowing when things might start panning out.
Yeah, I think I'm older than you because I was in Excel for probably 8 months. My first 8 months, I had my little Excel customer tracker, Melissa's Excel customer tracker, right? And that's really how I kept track of everything. I'm on Monday now. I don't. Monday is not paying me. Call me Monday.
Oh yeah, Odo's not paying me either, y'all.
Monday is not paying me for referring their services. The project manager in me loves Monday because I can not only do the CRM function, but I can do the project management board, which has been helpful. So yes, but I love your thinking, Chris. I love the idea of like, hey, you start to formalize it. You start to use tooling. That makes you feel more grown up and really in it, right? I was sharing a text with one of my friends Damon, I'm like, we're really doing this. It's awesome. Yay. Like, and it's so good to have a community and a fam, to just keep lifting you up because some days feel really tough and stormy.
100%. Yeah. So however you do it, like whenever, even when I show my notebook here, when I write these things down, when it's not just a task floating around in my head, or when it's in a project management software, it's just got to be floating. It's got to be somewhere where it's material, and I can kind of see that started in. Like that might resonate with the X% of people that are kind of similar to me in that regard.
Yeah, and if Ojo is anything like a Monday, like that feeling when you can move it from, proposal negotiation to win is just like an awesome feeling. And you're like, yeah. Someone else said to me the other day, "Oh yeah, Melissa, you hunt what you eat what you kill." Yeah. It's a hunt what you kill or eat what you kill.
Yeah.
And I was like, I eat what I kill. Yes.
That's the business. That's the life, y'all. When you're starting out or when you're continuing on, and I should have started day one with the CRM. Like a lot of my background is on sales operations management, but it was just what do I start out with, and finally.
No, this is the innovator dilemma. It literally is the innovator dilemma. You spend so much time scaling other people's business, you forget that your own business is a business that needs to scale. One of my favorite inspirations is my cousin. She has her own PR firm in Memphis. She's incredible. I think she's been in business, at least 3 years now. Maybe she's at 4 or 5. And she started with a very extensive business plan. I know because she let me look at it, right? And that's one of the things I love to do is like look at someone else's business plan and give them all the ideas, right? And so someone asked me the other day, "Oh, Melissa, did you build a business plan?" And I said, "No, because I totally stumbled into stealth." Like I did not intend to build stealth. It is here now, and I love that. So I'm going back through to build its business plan. But it had no marketing, it had no brand. Like I was so impressed by you with modular feedback because you like had a name. I didn't even have a name.
Well, to anybody who can see, modular feedback was an easy name to come up with because that's a modular synthesizer behind me. And you start feeding back and connecting all these different systems, and you start making something beautiful. So that's where the name modular feedback came from. It's just all these different things that connect to give us that, give us the type of analytics and machine learning. I'm getting too deep into it, but yeah, thanks for thanks for that little pep talk there.
Yeah, I just think all of us at Founders need someone else lifting us up, whether it's, an advisor or a consultant or, you just need community when you're doing this. And I love to see Founders collaborate.
No doubt. Yeah, keep the collaboration up with us too. Again, we did our shout out to people like Val Hoffman and just people that have been reaching out. We just want to keep this community perspective. You see other people like sharing and liking the post, give them comments, talks, conversations. Now, getting into our pop culture segment. Oh my gosh, I see the smile on your face. Let's talk about what you're reading.
Yeah, okay, so I was not watching a lot of any new TV that we hadn't talked about this week. So I did, Handmaid's Tale has been unbelievable. So, we can definitely circle back to that. But I have been reading. So for people that need book recommendations, there is always my go-to favorite, Designing Your Life. They also do not pay me to talk about them, but I do love this for anyone who's trying to find their purpose or figure out what they want to do next in times of transition. Call me. We're totally fine to have book chat around Designing Your Life. The next thing I picked up, and I saw this, I think I saw a quote from it. It's called The Founder's Mentality. So just like we talked earlier about structured and unstructured, prompted and unprompted, as I spend more time with founders, I'm really trying to keep dissecting some of their pain points, how founders think. We are founders, so we can, analyze ourselves. But I'm finding this book to be really interesting. And, would love to hear from others, can certainly share a little bit more as I get a bit deeper beyond chapter 1. And you'll find this funny as I have 3 books out there. This one was actually recommended to me, Do Less. They were like, "Melissa, you seem very overscheduled." And I was like, "Oh, maybe I am a little overscheduled. I'll read this book. Let me add something to my overscheduled life. I'll read this book and I can let the fam know what I've learned from doing less." Um, those are my three. What about you, Chris?
There's a couple of books that I have over here. Let me grab them. One, shout out to Alyssa, our producer. I recommended this one to her. This one, I know it's a controversial name, but Gary Vaynerchuk and his book Day Trading Attention. I guess he's controversial for all the hustle culture stuff. Don't do the hustle culture part, but do kind of lean into what he's talking about when it comes to the communications around building a business. Because when you read what he says, he's talking about how don't overthink what the algorithm might do if you're posting 3 or 4 times a day. Get out there and it really helps with that don't gatekeep yourself conversation, because it's like bring people along the journey that you have as you're building a business or building out your innovations. Over communicate with the audience and the market. Keep listening, keep hearing from them and learning from them. This Day Trading Attention book is just about developing your content strategy, developing your outreach and everything like that, but doing it in a way that you're out there, you're confident about being in the thick of it, or a book that you just started reading rather than waiting until you're finished and waiting for it's perfect to release it. Powerful book in that regard. Another one,
I love that.
I want to give a shout out to, hold on, let me brush the dust off this one. I haven't picked this one up in a while, but I have this book right here, and it's called How Long Till Black Future Month. It's by N.K. Jemisin, and it's a collection of short stories. Do you know N.K.?
No, but I'll add these to my list after I finish the Do Less book.
Cool. Well, she was actually very influenced by one of my favorite authors that I think you do know about, Octavia Butler.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very again, shout out to our Black female sci-fi authors out there, because she's a Hugo Award-winning author, and the story that I would recommend, this is the collection of short stories, and The Trojan Girl is a really awesome short story in the book that you might like as we're entering an age where there's a lot more dependence on AI and algorithms and things like that. She wrote this book back in 2012, but a lot of it really feels prophetic to what's happening today. So just a few reading recs out there.
Yeah, sounds amazing. Okay, and then I just have to close with a shout out to two of our fam. Our friend Melissa Shackelford's book came out. It is called Harnessing Purpose. I have ordered it, and so I can show it next episode.
I'm gonna order mine.
Yeah, so I'm so excited, and she really takes this from a lens of how a marketer might inspire connection. So love that. Huge shout out to Melissa for doing that. And then a friend from my past, from my time at Optum Behavioral, Lily Carell, she and I were able to reconnect this past week. And she also wrote a book on trauma-informed care, Resolve to Rise. So I love to hear people out there not only reading books, but writing them. So go fam, go innovators. We just love that.
Absolutely amazing work. And yeah, I'm going to order Melissa's book right after this call. We need the Melissas to outnumber the Chris's on this call one day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we already have the Melissa Alyssa. We could definitely get the other Melissa. It'll be like the Suz against the Chris.
There we go. There we go. So great, absolutely awesome shout outs. And I just want to add on a little bit on to that Melissa point is I just want people to take a look at what's going on in the healthcare marketing space. Take a look at what healthcare marketers are doing, because people are, I don't know. It seems like a lot of times there's missing out on like bring the marketer to the seat at the table to talk about what do we know about our communities, what's the outreach, what's the type of engagement that we can have. And I think that role is going to get more and more important as people realize, like with things like the PHTI study highlighting engagement, you're going to need to be able to work with people that understand how that engagement picture works.
Yeah, and even going back to that feedback, to truly understand what people are thinking and saying about you in an unstructured, unprompted way becomes really important, because if you lose pulse of your ICP, your buyer, your product's going to fail.
Beautifully said. And for the folks listening, If you liked the episode, let us know. We love reviews on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening, and that get the word out and expand the fam.
Amazing. Well, thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today, Chris. I hope you have the best weekend.
Absolutely. Yeah, we recorded on a Saturday, but we got through it. We're still alive. We're still happy. And maybe I'll get some coffee after this.
Yeah, we're consistent. I love it. Thanks, as always, to Alyssa for taking great care of us.
Absolutely. Thank you.